Don't sit near her. She's just a waitress. The words sliced through the air like cold steel. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. Clinking glasses, polished smiles, the clatter of silverware, it was all background noise to the silence pressing against my chest. I stood awkwardly near the patio entrance, tray in hand, fingers trembling just enough that I had to steady them before another champagne flute tipped over. My cousin Haley had spoken loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. She smirked, not even trying to hide it. Her designer dress shimmered in the afternoon sun like she was auditioning for a role she already believed was hers, the golden girl. My uncle chuckled. Next time, dress her in black so guests don't get confused. More laughter. My father said nothing. As always, just gave me that familiar look, disappointment glazed over with polite discomfort, like I was someone else's problem. I wasn't even invited to the reunion. I was working it. Yeah, that's the part nobody talks about. How you show up to your own family reunion because your catering gig sent you there. I turned, swallowing the shame down with a bitter smile. Just another job. Just another hour. Just another reminder. Excuse me, can I take this glass? I asked softly to the elderly woman at the table nearest me, trying to focus on service. Focus on moving. She nodded gently, giving me a sympathetic smile. That tiny kindness almost undid me. As I turned, I caught a glimpse of my little brother, the only one who ever really looked at me like I wasn't a stain on the family name. He was older now, taller, dressed in something expensive he probably borrowed from Dad. He didn't say anything. Just stared.
Torn.
I didn't blame him. The reunion was loud, filled with forced affection and real judgment. Lush garden, expensive table settings, guests in pearls and pressed suits. And me, in my black apron and sensible shoes. Then brakes screeched outside the gate. Heads turned. A sleek black car, luxury by any standard, pulled up to the stone driveway. Glossy, polished, foreign. One of those cars that doesn't just arrive, it announces. The door opened. Silence swept the lawn like a hush before a storm. A man stepped out.
Tall.
Sharp. Tailored suit that looked hand-stitched to his frame. His presence wasn't just commanding, it was undeniable. His eyes scanned the crowd, and his steps were purposeful. My aunt whispered something that sounded like, "Who is that?" But her voice was suddenly small. He walked past the hedge. Right toward the crowd. Right toward me. And then he smiled. "I've been looking everywhere for you," he said. I froze. So did everyone else. He stopped a foot away from me. People stared, wide-eyed, uncertain. And then he did something no one expected. He opened his arms and pulled me into a hug. Not polite, not casual. Like he knew me. Like he missed me.
Gasps.
A champagne flute slipped from someone's fingers and shattered on the stone tiles. My father stood, blinking. My cousin's smile faded faster than a setting sun. My uncle's mouth opened, then closed, trying to form a question but failing miserably. "You still like cinnamon rolls?" he whispered in my ear, warm, nostalgic. I blinked hard, choking down the sting in my throat. "You remember that?" He pulled back and nodded, his eyes soft but proud. "Every Sunday." I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but the words, all the things I wanted to say for years, caught in my throat. He turned to the stunned crowd. "Sorry to interrupt your little reunion," he said coolly. "But she and I have a breakfast date we're very late for." And just like that, he took my hand. I didn't resist. I couldn't. Not as we walked through the stunned crowd, not as he opened the car door for me, not as the engine purred, and we pulled away from the garden party that used to feel like a life sentence. As we drove, I finally found my voice. "Why now?" I whispered. He smiled without looking away from the road. "Because it took me this long to deserve you." The silence in the car wasn't awkward. It was thick with history. As we cruised along the winding road out of the estate, the trees lining the way blurred past the window, but my thoughts were sharper than ever. I kept glancing sideways at him. This man, this billionaire who just pulled me out of one of the most humiliating scenes of my life, like it was scripted. He still hadn't told me his name. You said breakfast? I asked, my voice thin. He chuckled.
Yeah.
You never missed Sunday breakfast when we were kids. French toast with too much cinnamon, hot chocolate, that weird fruit salad you insisted on making. My breath caught.
Wait.
My eyes snapped to his face. Ryan. He smiled. And it was him. Older. Different. But those eyes, still soft on the edges, still too kind for this world. Ryan Langston. The neighbor boy from the foster house. My only real friend back when the world felt like it wanted nothing to do with us. You remember, he said quietly. I thought you got adopted and forgot all about us. He shook his head slowly, one hand gripping the wheel.
No.
I never forgot. I just made a promise to myself that I wouldn't come back until I could change everything. I turned to the window, eyes stinging. Well, you've succeeded. He didn't say anything for a while. Just let the road hum between us, soft and constant. Finally, we pulled into a quiet part of the city. Old brick buildings, morning sunlight casting golden rays through narrow alleys. He parked beside a cozy little cafe with ivy curling along the windows and a blue door that looked like something from a storybook. You brought me here? I asked, half smiling. This place still exists. He got out and rounded to my side, opening the door like we were in a romance movie. You used to say if you ever got rich, you'd buy this cafe and live upstairs. I stared at him. Don't tell me you. He nodded. I bought it last year. My legs nearly gave out. Inside, the smell hit me first. Cinnamon.
Coffee.
A whisper of vanilla. The waitress didn't even blink as we sat at the corner table. Maybe he came here often. Maybe the world was already used to seeing him like this. Calm, quiet, generous. He ordered without needing a menu. 2 cinnamon rolls, extra glaze. And 2 mugs of hot chocolate. With whipped cream. He looked at me. Still your order? My lip trembled. You remembered everything. I had nothing else to remember, he said, his voice quieter now. You were the only good thing about that place. Silence again. But not heavy this time. Healing. I didn't know who you'd become, I whispered. I was scared to ask. I looked you up once, years ago, but couldn't find you. That was intentional, he said. I kept a low profile for a long time. Until I couldn't anymore. I wanted to find you last year, but the private investigator said you'd moved too often. Changed numbers. New jobs. I nodded. I kept running. I know.
He leaned in.
That's why I came today. I found out your family hired the catering company for that reunion. I asked someone to make sure you'd be the one assigned to it. I blinked. So that wasn't a coincidence? He gave a small smile. There's no such thing when you've spent years looking. My throat closed up. The waitress brought our cinnamon rolls, steaming and sweet. The scent was overwhelming. The taste even more so. I hadn't felt this scene in years. You never told me what you do now, I said after a while, pushing the empty plate aside. I invest, he said casually. I build things.
Help people.
I don't talk about it too much because I've seen what money does to people. I nodded slowly. And you, he said, you still work 3 jobs? I looked down. 2 now. I quit the cleaning one last month. Just this catering and a night shift at the diner. He reached into his pocket and slid something across the table.
A key.
And a note. What's this? Something you once told me you deserved, he said. A place that was yours. A fresh start. And a job offer. I shook my head, overwhelmed. Ryan, I can't take this. It's not charity, he interrupted gently. It's gratitude. You gave me love when no one else did. When I had nothing. You made a scared, abandoned kid feel like he had a home. He paused, swallowing. Let me return that. Tears welled in my eyes. Not because of the gift. But because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like just a waitress anymore. I felt like a human being. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers. Blocked calls. My inbox filled faster than I could delete. But I didn't answer any of them. Because I was still sitting cross-legged on the floor of my new apartment, staring at the keys Ryan had given me, the untouched job contract folded on the coffee table like a secret waiting to be believed. It wasn't some penthouse in the sky. It was something better. A warm, sunlit studio on the top floor of the very cafe he bought. Ivy-covered windows, exposed brick, shelves already lined with books, and a little note taped to the fridge. "You belong here. Don't ever forget that."
R.
For someone who'd never had a space to call mine, not truly, this was more than a room. It was a declaration that I wasn't invisible anymore. But the phone wouldn't stop. And eventually, curiosity won. I answered one. It was Haley, my cousin. Her voice was sugary.
Shaken.
"Hey, hi. So, what was that yesterday?" I didn't respond. She pushed on awkwardly. "Was that guy really a billionaire? Like the Ryan Langston?" I stared out the window, voice calm. "Yes." There was silence on the line.
A beat.
"Then, are you two, like, dating?" I could practically hear her eyes narrowing through the speaker, calculating. "No," I said simply. "We're old friends." Right, of course," she rushed. "It's just, everyone was a little surprised. I mean, we didn't know you were connected like that." I almost laughed, like she was trying to pretend the last 10 years hadn't happened. Like she hadn't called me a pathetic broom girl when I spilled juice on her boots at Grandma's birthday. Like she hadn't just yesterday told her kids, "That's what happens when you don't get a degree. You end up refilling your family's wine glasses." "Haley," I said quietly, "what do you want?" Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just thought maybe we could grab lunch sometime. Catch up? Like family." I smiled bitterly. It was beginning. The same people who had turned their backs on me were suddenly remembering my name. The same ones who laughed when I stood in catering uniforms were now scrambling to realign their social orbit. And yet, there was no satisfaction in it.
Not yet.
Because the truth was I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted to exist without earning back space I never should have had to beg for. That night, I walked into the cafe below, wearing something simple but new. Ryan was behind the counter, rolled up sleeves, hands dusted with flour, laughing with the staff like he wasn't worth more than half the city block. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "You came." "I live here now," I teased softly. "Still." He poured me a mug of hot chocolate and slid it across the counter like we were still 16. "I got an idea," he said suddenly. "Something big." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." He nodded. "You know how you told me once that people like us never get seen unless we do something outrageous?" I chuckled. "Yeah. You said you'd fake your death just to trend for a day." He laughed. "I've matured a little since then. But I want to build something, a program, a foundation. For people like us. The ones who got left behind." I blinked. He was serious. "And I want you to run it." I nearly dropped the mug. "What?" "You've lived it. You know the cracks. I trust you. I'll give you the resources, the staff, the full freedom to shape it. You'll be the face of it. And no one will be able to look away anymore." For a moment, I just stared at him. My hands, once used to scrubbing dishes and pouring drinks for people who never remember my name, were now being offered the chance to change lives. To be seen, not just for myself, but for others like me. For the first time, I saw what redemption could look like. Not in revenge, but in restoration. And still, the calls kept coming. That weekend, my father's number showed up. I didn't answer. Not yet. Not until I was ready. Not until I had something to say that couldn't be laughed off, erased, or dismissed. The invitation came wrapped in polished gold trim. A formal envelope, hand-delivered by courier, with embossed lettering that read, "Langston Legacy Gala, honoring community impact and social change." I hadn't been invited as a guest. I was listed as the keynote speaker. And that's when it hit them. That this wasn't just a fluke. Or a temporary streak of luck. Or a one-time moment when I was lifted from waitress girl to the one the billionaire hugged. This was something real. Something lasting. Something they couldn't take back with whispers or smirks. That weekend, As I prepared to step onto the stage at the Langston Foundation Gala, my family arrived too, every single one of them. Not because they were proud, but because they were curious. Because Ryan was hosting it. And because they couldn't believe I was the one people were whispering about now. The venue was a glittering museum-turned-ballroom, lined with velvet drapes and lit by golden chandeliers. A red carpet swept through the entrance, and press photographers crowded both sides, clicking away as names passed beneath the lights. I wore the dress Ryan picked with me. Not flashy, not revealing. Just strong. A rich navy blue that framed my shoulders and made me stand tall. My hair was done simply. My face was calm. But inside, a storm. As I entered the ballroom, I spotted them, all of them, seated at a long table near the front. My father, Haley, my uncle and aunt, my brother. Their expressions twisted with disbelief as they saw me. Not because I was there, but because I belonged there. And then, the moment, a volunteer coordinator walked over to my family's table. "Excuse me," she said gently. "You're in the reserve section for Foundation executives and honored partners. I'll have to ask you to move." Haley scoffed. "We're family." The woman blinked. They all turned to me. I didn't say a word. The woman followed their gaze. Recognition flickered across her face. Then clarity. "Oh," she said softly. "I'm sorry. These seats are for her guests. She personally assigned them. You're welcome to sit further back." Silence. My uncle's jaw twitched. Haley's eyes narrowed. My father didn't speak. He just stood up slowly, each movement stiff with disbelief, and walked past me without a word. The others followed, clutching their pride like it was something breakable. Ryan appeared at my side just as the MC took the stage. "Nervous?" he asked gently. "No," I whispered. "Just awake." He gave a nod, then lightly placed a hand on my back as my name was called. The applause was polite, curious, cautious. I stepped up to the podium and stared at the crowd, not for effect, but because I needed a second. Not for them. For me. And then I spoke. Most of my life, I've been told where I could and couldn't sit. At dinner tables. At weddings. Even at my own family reunion. A few murmurs. But here's what they never tell you, that you have the power to move the chair. To walk away from tables where you're only tolerated and build your own where you are truly welcomed. The murmurs deepened. Some nods. Some uncomfortable glances. I breathed in. I was once a girl who wiped plates while listening to people laugh about how I'd never be anything more. And then someone with a memory and a heart reminded me that dignity doesn't come from wealth. It comes from recognizing others who've been forgotten. From lifting, not stepping over. The ones who serve in silence. More nods. A stillness in the room now. Cameras flashing. Phones recording. "My name is Amelia Hayes," I continued. "And I'm not ashamed of where I came from. I used to be a waitress. I still make cinnamon rolls on Sundays. And today, I get to lead a program that will make sure no girl like me ever feels small again." I looked down toward the second row. My father looked away. Haley's eyes were glassy. And my brother?
He stood and clapped.
He didn't say a word. He just kept clapping. Others joined in. Then more. Until the whole room was on its feet. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because this was what I'd been waiting for. Not applause. But clarity. Not revenge. But recognition. 3 days later, I got a call. From him. My father. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the red icon. Heart pounding. But something in me whispered, "You need to know what he'll say when he thinks you're finally equal." So I answered. "Amelia." Just my name. No anger. No condescension. Just a single word, heavy with years unsaid. "I saw the video," he said after a pause. "You spoke well." "Thank you," I replied evenly. Another long silence. Then, "I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" I asked, not out of challenge but curiosity. What exactly didn't he know? That I was capable? That I had a voice? "That it would be you," he said. "The one who made it." I didn't flinch. You mean the one you made sit at the edge of every room?
He sighed.
It wasn't defiant, just tired. I was hard on you. Maybe because I thought you wouldn't survive otherwise. Or maybe because I didn't know how to love someone who didn't turn out the way I planned. I leaned against the window of the cafe apartment. I never needed your plan. I needed your presence. I know that now, he whispered. And it landed.
Soft.
But not without cost. I don't hate you, I said, surprising myself. Then why does it feel like you're punishing us? He asked, voice cracking. Like you built all this just to show us what we missed. I smiled gently. I didn't build it to show you. I built it so the next girl never needs to explain herself to anyone again. He didn't respond. And he didn't have to. Because that was the truth. And truths don't need validation to remain true. 2 weeks later, I walked into another event, not a gala, not a charity ball. Just a family dinner. A simple backyard gathering. And this time, I wasn't serving food. I was invited. I brought cinnamon rolls. Everyone paused when they saw me walk in, a pause soaked in discomfort, curiosity, maybe a little regret. But I didn't come for their guilt. I came for me. Haley approached me first, biting her lip. You look amazing. Thanks, I said, handing her a plate of rolls. Don't worry, they're not poisoned. She laughed awkwardly. I deserved that. I shrugged. We all did what we knew. Now we do better. And just like that, the air softened. My brother hugged me, whispered, I'm proud of you, into my ear. My aunt asked about the foundation. Even my uncle said, You've got your mother's fire. She would have loved to see this. But it was my father who took the longest to move. He waited until everyone was eating, then came and sat beside me. Not across, beside. And after a moment, he lifted his fork, cut a piece of cinnamon roll, and said, This tastes like the ones your mother used to make. I learned from her. He nodded. Then maybe you should host the next reunion. I turned to him, eyes steady. Maybe I will. He didn't argue, didn't flinch, just quietly nodded, as if he'd known, deep down, that this table belonged to me now. And later that night, as I looked around the backyard that once held nothing but stares and whispers, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
Not because they had changed, but because I had. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud. It's not cold. It's becoming someone they have no choice but to respect. And when the time came, I didn't rub it in. I just smiled and passed the cinnamon rolls.
It was a sweltering summer afternoon when the pristine glass doors of the Sapphire Crest Hotel swung open, revealing a young woman who didn't look like she belonged to the opulent world surrounding her. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as she approached the grand reception desk. Her name was Emily. She carried herself with quiet confidence despite her modest appearance. A simple sundress, a faded backpack slung over her shoulder, and strands of blonde hair sticking to her face from the heat. The receptionist, Amanda, a sharp-featured woman with a razor-sharp tongue, took one look at Emily and smirked. Her tailored suit and air of superiority were weapons she wielded with precision. This girl, Amanda thought, didn't belong here. The Sapphire Crest wasn't just any hotel. It was a sanctuary for the elite, a haven for the wealthy, and a fortress against the common folk. Emily stepped up to the counter and smiled politely. Hi, I'd like to check in, please. Amanda arched a perfectly manicured brow, her tone laced with condescension. Are you sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? The budget motel is a couple of blocks down. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. I'm in the right place. I have a reservation. Amanda sighed dramatically, flipping through her computer with an exaggerated show of reluctance. Name? Emily Brooks. Amanda's fingers clicked against the keyboard. A frown creased her forehead as she scanned the screen. We don't have an Emily Brooks listed here. Are you sure you made the reservation? You know, sometimes people dream big and think they can afford places like this. Emily's patience thinned. I made the reservation, and I have the confirmation email if you'd like to see it. Amanda waved a dismissive hand. Email confirmation means nothing. Anyone can fake one. Let's be real here, you're not exactly our usual clientele. Why don't you save yourself the embarrassment and leave? The humiliation burned hot in Emily's chest. She dug into her backpack, pulled out her phone, and thrust it toward Amanda. Here, check it yourself. Amanda didn't even glance at the phone. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Honey, this is the Sapphire Crest. Do you even know how much one night here costs? We don't let just anyone walk in off the street. Emily's hand trembled, not from fear but from the sheer frustration of being judged. She opened her mouth to retort when a sharp voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? Both women turned. A man in his late 40s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, strode toward them. His presence commanded attention, and Amanda immediately straightened, her demeanor flipping into one of forced politeness. Mr. Carter, Amanda chirped. There's been a little misunderstanding. Emily froze. The man standing before her was her father, Jacob Brooks. Though their relationship had always been complicated, he owned the Sapphire Crest, and she knew he wouldn't stand for this treatment. Jacob's piercing blue eyes locked onto Amanda. Misunderstanding? Amanda hesitated. This young woman claims she has a reservation, but as you can see, she gestured toward Emily with a sneer. She's clearly mistaken. Jacob turned his gaze to Emily. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but he said nothing that revealed their connection. Instead, he simply asked, Do you have a reservation, miss? Emily nodded, her voice firm. Yes, I do. Under the name Emily Brooks. Jacob gave a small nod. Then it seems there's no issue. Amanda, check her in. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But, Mr. Carter, she... Now, Jacob commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Amanda reluctantly began typing, her face a mask of resentment. Fine. A single room, I assume? Jacob interjected. No, she'll have one of our suites. Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. A suite? Yes, Amanda. Is that a problem? Amanda swallowed hard. No, of course not. As Amanda handed over the key card with trembling fingers, Emily took it, her head held high. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was louder than words. She turned and walked away, her step steady, but her heart raced with a mix of triumph and fury. This was only the beginning. Emily wasn't going to let this insult slide. Not because of her own pride, but because she knew she had to expose the rot beneath the surface of places like this. People like Amanda thrived on unchecked power, and Emily had spent her life watching her father build his empire without understanding the cost to those trampled underfoot. As Emily entered the grand suite, her resolve solidified. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting things right. But she wasn't prepared for what would come next. The skeletons she'd uncover, the alliances she'd form, and the high-stakes battle that would unfold, shaking the Sapphire Crest Hotel to its core. Emily paced the lavish suite, her fingers brushing against the silken curtains, the polished wooden furniture, and the marble countertop of the minibar. The sheer extravagance of the room was a stark reminder of her father's empire, a world she had purposely distanced herself from. But now, she was back, and the fire in her chest demanded action. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen to see a text from her best friend. Mia, how's the hotel? You okay? Emily quickly typed back. It's complicated, but I'm not leaving until I fix this. Emily descended the grand staircase, her head held high. The lobby buzzed with activity. Businessmen barking into phones, tourists gawking at the chandeliers, and staff flitting about in hushed efficiency. Amanda stood at the reception desk, her posture stiff, her lips pursed into a thin line. Emily approached her like a storm brewing on the horizon. Good morning, Emily said, her tone cool but edged with steel. Amanda looked up, the fake smile plastered across her face barely concealing her disdain. Oh, it's you. Enjoying your stay? Immensely, Emily replied. I'd like to speak with the manager. Amanda's smile faltered. Mr. Carter is very busy. Emily leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Then tell him his daughter is here. Amanda froze, her eyes darting toward the office door. Daughter." Emily crossed her arms, waiting. Amanda stammered out an apology before disappearing into the office. Moments later, Jacob emerged, his expression unreadable. "Emily," he said, his voice steady. "Let's talk somewhere private." In his office, Jacob gestured for Emily to sit, but she remained standing. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. "What are you doing here?" he asked, leaning against his desk. "Trying to enjoy a vacation," Emily replied. "But your staff had other ideas." Jacob sighed. "I'll handle Amanda. She'll apologize." Emily's laugh was bitter. "This isn't just about her. It's about everything, the way people like her treat others because they think they can. The way this place thrives on exclusivity while stomping on anyone who doesn't fit the mold." Jacob's jaw tightened. "You don't understand how the business works, Emily. We cater to a specific clientele, and that gives your staff the right to humiliate people?" She shot back. "You've built a palace for the rich and powerful, but at what cost?" Jacob ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "What do you want me to do?" "Let me work here," Emily said suddenly. Jacob blinked. "What?" "You heard me. I want to work here. Start at the bottom, see what really goes on. I won't tell anyone who I am. Just let me do this." Jacob hesitated. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I know exactly what I'm asking for," Emily said. "Unless you're afraid I'll uncover something you don't want to see." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Jacob finally nodded. "Fine. But don't expect any special treatment." Emily's first shift began at the front desk. Amanda, who had clearly been briefed to keep her behavior in check, handed Emily a crisp uniform. "Try not to embarrass us," she said with a forced smile. Emily smirked. "I'll do my best." Her tasks were mundane, checking in guests, answering phones, and directing inquiries. But it didn't take long for her to see the cracks in the hotel's pristine facade. Staff whispered about unfair workloads, guests complained about overcharges, and the air reeked of silent desperation. One particularly tense moment came when a harried housekeeper named Rosa approached Amanda, nervously clutching a cleaning schedule. "I can't do all these rooms in one shift," Rosa said, her voice trembling. "It's too much." Amanda's response was icy. "Then maybe you're not cut out for this job." Emily watched, her fists clenched, as Rosa retreated, tears brimming in her eyes. It was the same dynamic she had experienced at the front desk. Only now it was clear that Amanda's cruelty extended far beyond her. By the end of her first week, Emily had earned the trust of several staff members, including Rosa and a young bellboy named Daniel. She listened to their stories of mistreatment, long hours, and low pay. Slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. Late one night, she gathered a small group in the break room. "This place needs to change," she said. "But we can't do it alone." Rosa looked skeptical. "What can we do?" "They'll fire us if we speak out." "They won't fire all of us," Emily said. "We need to stand together, expose what's really going on here." Daniel nodded. "But how do we do that?" Emily smiled, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Leave that to me." Emily spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. Photos of unsafe working conditions, recordings of Amanda's verbal abuse, and testimonies from staff. She even managed to capture video footage of a high-ranking manager skimming money from the hotel's accounts. With everything compiled, she approached her father. This time, she didn't ask for permission. She demanded action. "Emily, this could ruin us," Jacob said, his face pale as he reviewed the evidence. "Or it could save us," she countered. "You always taught me to fight for what's right. Now's your chance to prove you meant it." Jacob's gaze softened. For the first time, he saw not just his daughter but a fierce, determined woman standing before him. "All right," he said. "Let's do this." What followed was a storm of media attention. Emily and Jacob held a press conference, exposing the corruption and pledging to rebuild the Sapphire Crest as a place of integrity. Amanda and the corrupt manager were fired, and the staff received better pay and treatment. The journey wasn't easy, and the road ahead was long. But as Emily stood in the lobby, watching Rosa smile for the first time in weeks, She knew it had all been worth it. The Sapphire Crest Hotel had always been a beacon of luxury, but now it was on the verge of becoming something far greater, a symbol of transformation. Emily's actions had sparked a revolution, both within the hotel and beyond its glittering walls. But as the dust settled, the real work began. The hotel's reputation hung by a thread, and both Emily and her father knew they had to rebuild not just its image, but its very foundation. Emily sat in the newly renovated break room with Rosa, Daniel, and a few other staff members. The atmosphere was tense, but it carried a sense of hope. Jacob entered the room, looking uncharacteristically humble. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know the past few months have been hard, harder than they should have been. And for that, I take full responsibility." The staff exchanged wary glances. Jacob continued, "This hotel was my dream, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really matters, the people who make it all possible. That changes today. Starting now, every decision we make will prioritize fairness, respect, and dignity for everyone here." Emily watched her father closely. His voice lacked its usual commanding tone, replaced instead with genuine regret. She felt a pang of something she hadn't expected, pride. Daniel raised a hand hesitantly. "What about the pay cuts we've been dealing with? And the impossible schedules?" Jacob nodded. "Those were wrong and we're fixing them. Effective immediately, wages will be increased to a fair rate, and scheduling will be adjusted to ensure no one is overworked." Rosa spoke up, her voice trembling. "And Amanda? Will there be more people like her?" Emily stepped in. "That's why we're establishing a staff council, so you all have a voice in how things are run. If there's ever another Amanda, you'll have the power to hold them accountable." The room buzzed with cautious optimism. Emily didn't stop there. She worked tirelessly alongside Jacob to implement changes. They partnered with local organizations to ensure fair hiring practices and launched an employee wellness program. Weekly staff meetings became a norm, giving everyone a platform to voice their concerns and suggestions. The transformation wasn't just internal. Guests began to notice the changes too. The staff were more relaxed, their smiles genuine. Reviews poured in, praising not just the hotel's luxury, but the warmth and hospitality of its employees. Meanwhile, Amanda's story took a darker turn. After being fired, she attempted to sue the hotel for wrongful termination, but Emily's mountain of evidence crushed her claims. Her reputation in the hospitality industry was ruined, and she struggled to find work. One day, Emily spotted Amanda outside a coffee shop, looking disheveled and defeated. Against her better judgment, Emily approached her. "Amanda," she said softly. Amanda looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want? Come to gloat?" "No," Emily replied. "I came to see if you're okay." Amanda laughed bitterly. "Do I look okay?" Emily hesitated. "You made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean you can't start over. Everyone deserves a second chance, if they're willing to change." Amanda's expression softened, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. "Spare me your pity," Emily sighed, handing her a card. "If you ever decide you want help, call me." As she walked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder if Amanda would ever take her up on the offer. Months later, the Sapphire Crest held its grand reopening. The event was a spectacle, with glittering lights, a red carpet, and a guest list filled with influential figures. But for Emily, the real highlight was seeing the staff, dressed to the nines, laughing and mingling with the guests, their confidence radiating. Jacob took the stage to give a speech, but instead of addressing the crowd, he turned to Emily. "This hotel is more than just a business. It's a legacy. And tonight, I want to recognize the person who reminded me what that legacy should stand for. Emily, thank you for showing me what true leadership looks like." The crowd erupted into applause, but Emily's focus was on the faces of the staff. Their smiles were all the recognition she needed. In the weeks that followed, Emily considered her next steps. The Sapphire Crest was thriving, but her work there felt complete. One evening, Jacob found her sitting on the balcony of the suite she had once checked into under such different circumstances. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked. Emily nodded. "There's so much more I want to do." This was just the beginning. Jacob smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. Wherever you go, you'll make a difference. I'm proud of you, Emily. For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of their complicated history lift. Thanks, Dad. As Emily packed her bags, she looked around the room one last time. The Sapphire Crest had been a battleground, a classroom, and a home. It had changed her as much as she had changed it. With one final glance at the hotel's glowing facade, Emily stepped into the waiting cab, ready to take on whatever challenge came next. Because if there was one thing she had learned, it was that true change always starts with one person daring to take a stand. The sound of laughter echoed down the long hallway, bouncing off the marble floors like a cruel melody. Melissa stood frozen at the doorway, her hand still gripping the edge of the tray she was holding, a thin sheen of sweat forming on her forehead. The man sitting at the long, gleaming dining table, Chase Winters, was laughing at something one of his friends had said, and all eyes were on her. It was always like this. It always had been. Look at her, one of his friends said, a sneer creeping into his voice. How old are you, sweetheart? 16? 17? Melissa didn't answer. She never did. Instead, she lowered her gaze, trying to ignore the humiliation that prickled at the back of her neck. Her uniform, an unflattering maid's outfit, seemed to be the punchline of every joke. The silk gloves, the polished shoes, the apron. It all felt like a costume in a play she was forced to perform. Chase, the millionaire heir of the Winters Empire, leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine between his fingers as if he had all the time in the world. His eyes met hers, and for a split second, she saw something flicker in them. A hint of superiority, the belief that he was better than everyone else in the room. And then he smiled. Tell me, he drawled, his voice rich and arrogant. What's it like to be so insignificant? The room fell silent. The comment stung, and though she wanted to scream, to defend herself, to throw that tray in his face, Melissa stood there perfectly still. What would be the point? In his world, she was nothing more than a ghost. She had been hired to serve him and his guests, to clean up after their messes, to make sure everything ran smoothly. And no matter how many times she tried to tell herself that it was just a job, that it didn't matter, the truth was, every time he mocked her, every time they belittled her, it chipped away at her. She wasn't supposed to be here. Melissa, he said, leaning forward now, his smirk deepening. Are you too stupid to answer? She felt her face flush, her heart pounding, but she still didn't speak. Instead, she set the tray down on the table and quickly turned to leave. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to leave before the tears started to fall. But before she could get out of the room, he called after her, his voice laced with mockery. What's the rush? Don't you want to hear the rest of the joke? She gritted her teeth and kept walking. It had been a long time since Melissa had felt any sort of dignity in her life. Years of working in the shadows, cleaning after people who saw her as little more than a tool for their comfort. But the ridicule, Chase's mockery, had taken it to a new level. She hated the way he looked at her, the way he saw her as something to be used, something to be discarded. That night, she retreated to her tiny room at the back of the house, away from the laughter and the clinking of glasses, away from the world of wealth and privilege that seemed so far beyond her reach. The walls of her room were bare, save for a small cot and an old wooden dresser. The only light came from a flickering lamp on the nightstand. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Winters mansion, but it was the only world she knew. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, a thought began to form in her mind. A dangerous, thrilling thought. She had been nothing but a servant, but that didn't mean she had to stay in that role forever. She was strong, capable. She was smarter than anyone in that room tonight. And yet, every time they looked at her, they saw a maid. They saw someone below them. But what if she could change that? What if she could make them see her differently? She was done being their punching bag. The next morning, as she slipped into her uniform and tied her apron tightly, Melissa knew she was no longer the quiet, invisible maid. She had been broken, but now, she was ready to rise from the ashes. The world she lived in was about to change, and so was she. It was a few days later when the knock came. Melissa had just finished cleaning the guest bathrooms when she heard the sound. The knock echoed through the house, and something in her chest tightened. She knew who it was before she even saw him. Chase Winters. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She was ready for this. She had a plan now. She opened the door slowly, her hands steady, her face blank. Chase stood there, dressed in his usual tailored suit, a confident smirk on his face. But there was something different in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a hint of concern. "What do you want, Mr. Winters?" Melissa asked, her voice colder than usual. His eyebrow quirked at the formality. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. "For last night. I didn't mean to upset you." She didn't believe him. Not for a second. Chase Winters didn't apologize. He never had. But the lie was exactly what she needed. "Oh, it's quite all right," she replied, her voice smooth. "I'm used to it." He stepped forward, his eyes studying her intently. "I'm serious," he said, his tone a little more earnest than before. "I know I've been a bit of an ass. Let me make it up to you. Dinner tonight? Just you and me?" The words hit her like a slap, and she fought to hide her reaction. Was he really offering her dinner? Was he trying to make amends? She could see right through it. He wasn't apologizing, he was playing a game. But she wasn't going to back down now. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first walked into this house. "I'd love to," she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. That night, she arrived at the lavish dining room, her heart beating in her chest. The dinner table was set for two, just her and Chase. The rich, dimly lit chandelier above cast shadows across his face, and she could see the faint glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but tonight would be the start of his downfall. She took a seat across from him, her posture perfect, her eyes steady. "You wanted to make it up to me, Mr. Winters. I'm curious. What could you possibly offer that would make up for everything you've put me through?" Chase's smirk faltered for a moment, and she saw the crack in his armor. "I was thinking more along the lines of a fresh start," he said, his voice lowering. "Maybe we could start over?" Melissa didn't respond immediately. Instead, she picked up her wine glass, taking a slow sip as she studied him. The silence stretched on, heavy with tension, before she finally spoke. "You want to start over?" she repeated. "Interesting. But you see, Mr. Winters, I don't need a fresh start. What I need is something you can't give me." A flicker of confusion passed over his face, and she could see him struggling to keep his composure. He wasn't used to being challenged. "Tell me what you want, Melissa," he said, leaning forward, his voice soft but insistent. "Anything is yours." She set her glass down, her eyes never leaving his. "What I want is for you to understand the consequences of your actions," she said, her voice calm, but filled with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "I want you to know what it feels like to be insignificant, to be nothing, to be the one everyone looks down on. And then, I want you to see what happens when you underestimate someone." Chase froze. His confident facade cracked, and for the first time he saw her. Not as the maid, but as something more dangerous. Something he hadn't accounted for. The power shifted in that moment. "You're making a mistake, Melissa," he said, his voice now tinged with unease. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "You made the mistake. And now you're going to learn how it feels to lose everything." Chase's eyes widened for a brief second, his lips parted, but he didn't know how to respond. For the first time, Melissa saw the cracks in his armor, the facade of the wealthy, arrogant man beginning to break down. But she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping lower, each word laced with calm precision. "You think this is a game, don't you? That you can make a joke out of people like me, mock me, belittle me, and that's the end of it. But it's not. I'm not going to let you get away with it." Chase tried to mask his discomfort with a forced smile, but it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. He was no longer in control. Melissa was the one pulling the strings now. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming nervously on the edge of his wine glass. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't you. You're just a maid. You don't have the power to do anything to me. The words stung, but they didn't faze her. She had heard it all before. The same insults, the same belittling tone. But now the roles had reversed. Don't mistake my silence for weakness, Chase, she said, her eyes locking with his. The truth is, I've been waiting for the right moment. And now that I've got your attention, it's time for you to see just how far you've pushed me. He laughed nervously, clearly trying to regain his composure. You really think you can take me down? You're nothing but a pawn in my world. You're replaceable, disposable. The words cut through her like a knife, but she wasn't intimidated anymore. Not after everything she had endured in this house. Not after every insult, every cruel remark, every time they had looked down on her. Melissa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor as she walked toward the window, her back to him. The view of the city lights below was breathtaking, but it didn't matter. Nothing did except for the next step in her plan. You're right about one thing, she said quietly, turning back toward him. I'm nothing in your world, but you know what? Your world isn't the only one that matters. Chase's eyebrows furrowed, and he straightened in his chair, suddenly on edge. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Melissa's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. It means, Chase, that I'm done being underestimated. I'm done being your joke. You've made me believe for too long that I don't have power, but I do. And you're about to see just how much of it I've been holding on to. She walked back to the table, her steps confident now, and took a seat, never breaking eye contact. The tension between them was palpable, thick in the air. Let's see what happens when I start using the power that you think I don't have. The following days were a blur for Melissa. She didn't have time to waste. She was calculating every move, every word, every interaction, building her plan in the shadows while Chase continued to treat her as nothing more than a maid. But in her mind, the game had already begun. One evening, as the sun began to set, Chase was in his study, and Melissa stood at the doorway, a soft knock echoing in the silence. She could hear him muttering to himself, probably working on yet another business deal, oblivious to the storm that was brewing outside his perfect little world. Come in, he called, his voice authoritative but distracted. Melissa pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, her presence subtle but deliberate. She walked into the room slowly, taking in the opulence of the space. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, expensive leather furniture, a desk covered with papers and important documents. Everything screamed wealth, power, control. Everything except for her. She cleared her throat lightly, catching his attention. I have something for you, she said, her tone soft but laced with purpose. Chase looked up from his desk, the usual smirk crossing his face as he took in her presence. Oh, what's this? Another surprise? Melissa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward and set a folder down in front of him. The papers inside were thick with legal jargon, carefully prepared, meticulously researched. I thought you might want to know something, she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. Something about the company you've been working so hard to build. Chase raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What's this? A new business proposal? She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. No, it's information. About you. His expression shifted. The hint of amusement vanished, replaced by a flicker of wariness. What are you talking about? Melissa leaned in slightly, her gaze never leaving his. I know about the offshore accounts, the money you've been hiding, the deals you've been making under the table. You thought no one would ever find out, didn't you? Chase's face paled, and he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're bluffing, he said, his voice low and sharp. No, she said, her tone unwavering. I'm not bluffing. I have everything here, Chase. All the evidence. If you want to keep your little empire intact, you'll start treating me with respect. If you don't, I'll make sure everything comes crashing down. He took a step back, his eyes darting to the folder in front of him. then to Melissa's calm face. For a moment, he looked like a man caught in a trap he couldn't escape. His mind raced, calculating his next move. But there was no escape. The trap was set. "You think you can control me?" he asked, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Melissa stood her ground, her expression cold and firm. "I don't want to control you, Chase. I just want you to see what happens when you push someone too far." The following days brought a new kind of tension into the house. Chase Winters, the man who had once looked down on Melissa, was now in her grasp. The power had shifted, but Melissa wasn't done yet. She knew this was only the beginning. She had set the wheels of change in motion, and nothing would stop her now. She watched from the sidelines as Chase scrambled to protect his empire, but Melissa could see the cracks in his carefully built world. The calm facade was starting to crumble. Every phone call, every meeting, every interaction now had a hidden agenda. Melissa was in control, and she made sure he knew it. Chase tried to regain some of his footing by offering her more money, more privileges, more status. But none of it mattered. Melissa wasn't in this for the power or the wealth. She was in it for one thing: retribution. She wanted him to feel the humiliation she had felt all those years. She wanted him to understand what it felt like to be beneath someone else's heel. And slowly, as the days wore on, she began to see it. The cracks in Chase's armor deepened. The arrogance, once so strong, was now gone. It was replaced by something else: fear. Melissa was no longer invisible. She wasn't the maid. She wasn't the servant. She was the storm that would bring him to his knees. But she wasn't done yet. The days following Chase's realization that he was no longer in control were filled with tension. Every word he spoke seemed carefully measured, every step calculated. It was as though the man who once walked through life like a king, who thought nothing could touch him, had become a shadow of his former self. Melissa watched from the sidelines, her mind working tirelessly to ensure that she didn't just break him. She would make him understand. She was no longer the quiet, invisible maid. Now she was a force to be reckoned with. And while she had the upper hand, she had no intention of letting up. Her plan was unfolding perfectly, but she needed to stay patient. The final blow had to be precise. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house grew quieter, Melissa knew it was time. She had been observing every interaction between Chase and his inner circle. She had gathered the evidence she needed, and now, she had to push him into a corner. Chase had started avoiding her, not because he wanted to, but because he knew that every interaction with her meant he was closer to the abyss. Every time their eyes met, he saw the woman he had mocked, belittled, and disrespected. And now, she was his reckoning. Melissa entered the lavish office where Chase sat, his back turned to her as he examined some files. Without a word, she stepped into his line of sight, standing tall, her gaze unwavering. He froze when he saw her, and for the first time, she saw the unease flicker in his eyes. "What do you want now?" he asked, his voice tinged with both arrogance and fear. She didn't respond immediately, allowing the silence to stretch between them, suffocating, heavy. Finally, she walked closer to the desk and placed a neatly folded piece of paper in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, his voice guarded. He had no idea what was coming. He never did. "It's over, Chase," she said, her voice calm but with an edge. "Everything. I've had enough. Your time is up." He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the document. His face began to pale as he realized what she was holding. The truth was right there, in black and white, proof of the illegal dealings, the money laundering, the web of corruption he had so carefully hidden. This is nothing," he sputtered, his voice shaking. "You can't prove anything." Melissa smiled, a cold, confident smile. "You think that, don't you? But I've been one step ahead of you this entire time. I have all the proof, Chase. Every last bit of it." The air in the room seemed to crackle with tension. His hands trembled as he clutched the paper, his once unshakable confidence faltering. "You can't," he began, but she cut him off. "No, you can't," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his denial like a blade. "You thought you could walk all over me. You thought I was just some maid, some invisible part of your world that you could discard whenever you wanted. But here's the truth, Chase. You're not the powerful man you think you are. And now I'm the one who controls the game. She watched as his face turned red, his hands tightening into fists. The anger that had once been so intimidating now looked pathetic, desperate. He stood up, knocking over his chair in his haste, but Melissa didn't flinch. She stood her ground. You think this is over? He seethed, his voice rising in a controlled rage. You think you can ruin me? You're just a maid. I'm not just anything anymore, she interrupted. I'm your reckoning. Her words struck him like a physical blow. He took a step back, his breathing heavy. He was no longer the man who held all the power. Melissa had turned the tables completely. He knew she was serious. He knew there was no way out of this, no way to escape the consequences of his actions. For the first time in his life, he felt small, insignificant, helpless. Melissa, he said, his voice softer now, but tinged with desperation. Please, please, she repeated, her voice low and almost mocking. After everything you've done to me, after everything you've put me through, you think I'll show mercy? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was grasping at the edges of his power, but it was slipping through his fingers. The smug confidence he had once had was gone. He was broken. The consequences came swiftly. Melissa didn't waste time. She made sure the information she had gathered was sent to the right people, law enforcement, lawyers, journalists. She made sure every secret, every crime he had committed was exposed to the world. The same world he had manipulated and controlled for so long. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and legal battles. Chase's empire began to crumble, piece by piece. His assets were frozen, his business partners turned against him, and the public turned their back on the man who had once been untouchable. And through it all, Melissa watched from the shadows. She didn't need the fame or the recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing that she had taken control of her life. She had used every weapon at her disposal, intelligence, patience, and sheer willpower, to take down the man who had wronged her. Chase's downfall was a spectacle. The man who had once mocked her, who had humiliated her, was now facing criminal charges, his wealth and power stripped away. The mansion that had once been his symbol of dominance became a hollow shell of what it had been. The wealth, the luxury, it was all gone, and he was left with nothing. Melissa didn't attend the hearings. She didn't need to. She had already won. Her victory wasn't about seeing him punished. It was about reclaiming her own life. It was about standing tall and showing the world, and herself, that she was no longer powerless. Months passed, and the dust settled. Chase Winters was a broken man. His wealth, his reputation, everything he had once thought was untouchable had been taken from him. The world had turned its back on him, and he was left to face the consequences of his own actions. As for Melissa, she had moved on. She left the mansion that had once been her prison. She found a new job, one that gave her respect, one where she wasn't invisible. She built a new life, one where she was in control. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had already claimed it. But there was one thing she would never forget. She had been underestimated. She had been crushed by the weight of others' judgment. But she had fought back. She had risen from the ashes and taken what was rightfully hers. And no one would ever make her feel small again.